5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, willkommen, konnichiwa, ni hao, jambo, marhaba, ave. It's time for the Armist Inquisition yet again, coming in your ears at 96 kilobits per second on Sunday the 21st of November, episode 208. I'm Amish Phil.
I'm Amish Ben.
The dwarf, the cripple, and the mother of madness.
We've got Ryan back with us, the sorcerer of secret science, Ryan 7.
Hello, how you doing out there in the internet?
Very well. We're going to carry on pretty much from where we left last week, aren't we? And do some more decoding of the ancient wisdom.
The ancient mysteries.
Yes.
Yes, it got quite intense last time, I think. So
I was
the sequels are usually twice as much.
I was thinking like even someone who's like not completely unfamiliar with this stuff, who's done a bit of reading around it, I'm still gonna have to watch them
A few times.
Yeah, because there's just so much, and you little things that you notice as you go in that you'll notice the second time that you maybe missed the first time. So
They're very rich, especially because I've done this through images rather than just talking
visual
about
images.
Yeah, visual images.
Yeah.
So these things are dense and very depthful. They say about a lot of the occult images that they have at least 4 layers of meaning to them. That's not strictly true, but they're getting at something basically.
Yeah. I was thinking, what we were just saying before, it might be a good idea just for anyone who missed last week. Well, first of all, you need to go
and listen to it now.
Yeah, go and listen to it or go and watch it first. But maybe just to give a quick, brief overview for the people who watched it a week ago, maybe it's sort of the basic overview of what we covered last week.
Okay, so I had been studying the mystery traditions, the secret things that the ancients and the modern people were doing. And through those searches, I was looking at the tarot. The tarot then led me to look at something called a Saturn square, which it turned out there was an example of quite locally to me. And I went and had a look at it at about 1 o'clock in the morning and was quite amazed that those images looked less Christian. They were in a Christian churchyard, and more old pagan, as they would say, religion, very, very taroistic, they had an alchemical, magical bent to them.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind, these are like medieval images, so things are transitioning anyway. That the medieval world's picking up from the ancient world and kind of regurgitating a few things they've got. Not quite at the Enlightenment yet, but it does carry through the Enlightenment. In fact, this information sparked the Enlightenment. It was it Medici that said stop translating Plato or whoever, and we found the Hermetica, Hermes Trismegistus. This is where the wisdom is, and so they chucked all the much lauded philosophers to one side and studied Hermes, who is Mercury from alchemy. And that basically started the Renaissance, funnily enough.
Yeah, and some of the things you pointed out last week, just like on initial viewing of these stones, are things that scream like Templars or Saturn.
Saturn, that was what we got down to. The square itself says Sator, Aripo, Tenet, Opera, Rotas. It's a 5x5 square and can be read in lots of different directions. And from that square, you can pull out words like Satan and Aeon and other Saturnian gods. And we derived that Saturn is actually a god of time, and that he seems to be intermingled with Christianity somehow.
Yeah.
There's a veneer there. it seems to be peeling back not just a veneer from these pillars proposing themselves to be what would be modern Christian, but in fact there's like a Gnostic Christian mysticism layer at the back of it. And this mysticism isn't something just Christianity has. It's something all the traditions share to a greater or lesser extent.
And it was something that was stamped out by the Universal Church, the Catholic Church, in the early centuries. I mean, it pretty much died out around the 4th century, maybe, AD, the Gnostic sort of stuff. They were persecuted, weren't they?
They were. However, what the Vatican did was take it for themselves. So the Pope's 2 keys are the keys of Janus and Cybele. Cybele, it's a strange looking word.
Yeah.
And these are basically the keys to the spring and the autumn. Within Saturn's remit, as we were saying last time, is the power of the force. This idea that there's a death and rebirth, and during that process you can gain the energy necessary for rebirth. Going from winter to spring would be the analogy that's used, but this power can be accessed, and we were kind of getting towards looking at it. However, we were noticing lots of other things around this, that it's something to do with time and numbers, and there were some potions included in what we were talking about. There were some magic love potions in the form of hallucinogenic, entheogenic drugs. But we were only alluding to that. So far, we've basically said that Saturn is the pole star, and he is the still point around which all time moves, him being the god of time. Yeah. Anything else anybody like to bring up? That?
No, shall we plow on?
That's pretty ace, yeah.
Because we talked about the plow as well, didn't we? There was so much crammed in.
Seriously, go and check it. If you've already seen it, that was probably a nice refresher, but go and check that first episode.
So shall we carry on with slides then?
Sure we love.
Yeah. Oh, look at that.
Look at that. So we discussed the Chi Rho symbol, which is on the next slide. That's that PX. A Chi is the X, and the P is a Rho. A P and an R are interchangeable and are pretty much the same thing in Greek, even though this is in Latin. This is how they were playing it. So we looked at this symbol and said, even though it's related to Christianity, that Chi Rho is really Kronos, the old Roman god of time. That's where we get chronology from. And this is measured by the whirling of the heavens. We had a cross of the sun, which denoted spring, summer, autumn, and winter, i.e. the equinox and solstice, and that people were watching the plough as it goes around the pole star to find the pole star and to see what time it was, basically. Around the pole star is also the Ouroboros serpent, which we'll get into later on. But we're essentially looking at the heavens and using them as an analogy for ourselves and for other things.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So within that, we also were getting onto the fact that Moses is in the bottom right-hand corner there. Now, he has a serpent and a pole. The tree is the pole. It's the axis mundi. It's the thing that links the earth and the heavens. There's the pole of the earth, which is a skew with angle, and there's the pole of the heavens, which is just going straight up, basically. Again, what's the previous episode? So Moses there, his people were poorly, and they were like, "Oh, we've been poisoned." Can I pop that down there?
Yeah.
We've been poisoned, and Moses was like, "Hey, everybody chill out. Come over here. You check this serpent out. We'll put it on a pole." He called it a brazen serpent, like brass or fiery. So he put it on this pole, and everyone was cured of these snake bites. He took another snake and put it on a pole, and everyone was cured. And we're getting towards this kind of Kundalini thing, and there's a philosophy going on here as well that we'll get into later on. Also, there next to Moses are two little goats that will climb a very spiny looking tree And those two goats are symbolizing Capricorn, and they're from Sumeria or Babylon or Syria, somewhere like that. And they're symbolizing this horny old goat energy that one of the aspects of Saturn has, which is the devil and Satan. It's all the same character. It's just basically what time does. What Saturn is the last planet out that the ancients could see, stroke first one in. So he's the boundary around things. So when you that's materiality. So when you just focus on materiality, this Saturnian principle, you become the devil. And we'll see later on that actually, especially in the Kabbalah, this principle of Saturn seen as being feminine, because it's like the matrix to things, that time and space are the actual fundamental, and that whereas Jupiter would be the rules, this expansive thing where we say, okay, wait a minute, we're going to die, so let's not just eat chocolate-flavored crisps. We make a rule because Saturn, his father, makes the laws, i.e. cholesterol will kill the human body because of the laws of physics, basically. And that's what Saturn is. He's this matrix. Matrix being like mother, mater.
Yeah, it raises an interesting question there that you mentioned the ancients used Saturn as this analogy for time.
Mm-hmm.
It implies that they knew that it was the furthest planet from the sun, the furthest visible planet from the sun.
Yeah.
I presume the only way they could have known that would be by calculating the orbit through observation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that orbit is in synchronicity with the orbit of the moon.
Oh, right.
That it's 29.5 years for Saturn and 29.5 days in a month for the moon. So you get guys like David Icke that start, in my opinion, start to read it totally wrong and say, Saturn's this control center that limits you, and then the moon's broadcasting it to you. And it's to me, it's a misreading of this mysticism, which is basically that Saturn's this limiting factor, and the moon is like seen as the last stage of metaphysics before it pops out and hits you. It's like a lens. Everything that came before it gets lensed out through the moon, through the unconscious, which is true. All these things are philosophically true, if not actually true.
Cool.
So in the middle there, we got Carl Jung. He's got Serpent. That's Carl. That's not actually Carl Jung. It's one of Carl Jung's drawings.
Got a tough paper round.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't get that out of my head. That was brilliant. He's got all these animals, these instinctual, unconscious creatures at the bottom of the tree that are kind of gnawing on the roots of the tree. The tree symbolizes unity, the fact that the whole universe gathers as it gets towards this pole star point. And then you get things like alchemy on the bottom left. That's the tree of life with 7 serpents around the top. The planets were seen as serpents. We'll get into that in a little bit. And obviously that tree gets towards unity. You'll see that, I can't see from here, but I'm pretty sure that'll be Mercury, the symbol for Mercury at the top. That looks like a caduceus, 2 little horns, yeah? Excuse me. And it's this unity tree, basically. All the branches, as many branches there are, there's a single root. We use it, the tree of life is still an analogy for life. No, if David Attenborough was talking.
Sure.
Much as I like to compare myself to Dave. Right. So, we spoke briefly about how the Christmas tree is the same symbol, the serpent of time, stroke Kundalini stuff. Wraps up the tree in the form of tinsel. Then you've got the baubles, which are the stars. And then at the top of the tree is the pole star, stroke pineal gland.
Right.
The pineal gland is a unified organ. It's the only unified organ in the body. It's not split into 2 parts.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's an interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
And some people, this is in your brain.
It's right in the middle of your brain, just like the pole stars were right in the middle of the heavens.
Right. And some people call it like the third eye. Like
Seat of the soul.
Yeah.
It's been called many things. This is all speculative. It has links to DMT. So we're starting to see these same concepts cycling over and over again. that these heavens whirling around are an analogy for something in you, that you are an axis mundi, that this pole of the earth, the pillars of the Masons, the Christmas tree, however you want to look at it, the Jed pillar of Osiris, all of these things are you as much as they're anything else. And the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life and death are equally the pillars of the earth and galaxy, and the two pillars within you. Those two pillars are the nervous system and the cardiovascular system.
Oh, right.
Essentially, the endocrine system.
So the nervous system, would that be sort of the spinal cord going up there and finishing
the spine
at the brain?
and spinal column, yeah.
And then you can imagine that it goes into nerve endings like a tree, like tree roots or tree branches. Yeah. But what about cardiovascular? How is that? Is that the same?
That's similar. Like if you look at a set of lungs, you can see the
bronchioles and
well,
that jazz. Yeah,
it's via that system that essentially everything's pumped around. So, the nervous system indicates to the endocrine system's all your hormones, which are basically the seven. There are different glands on the end of your nerve endings that come from your spine, and there are essentially 7 of them, like 7 planets or 7 chakra. So we're getting beyond ourselves. It's a nice little teaser, but let's not go too far. So we've had this Christmas tree, which we've essentially said is this Cairo, this PX symbol with the alpha and omega, and that denotes time. Alpha and omega, the beginning and the end, the masculine A, the feminine omega. The P is Saturn's scythe, but it's also the plough and the pole star. And essentially the juxtaposition of the tilt of the earth, if we look to the image of the earth with a little circle above it next to the PX, we can see that that's on an axis of approximately 23.5 degrees, from 21 to 25 degrees, but approximately 23.5. And because of that axis, we have the seasons, so it's time. These are the factors of time. Now, that point of the pole star changes over a long period of time, over the aeons. We spoke about aeon being infinity and or a very, very long period of time. So the pole star, because of this axis of the earth, changes over this long period of time. So it's never, ever the same. And this is where we get the Ouroboros serpent, that this serpent of time is going along the marks of its back, essentially.
And it will return to the same point.
It will return to the same point.
The long count, which I'm guessing we're going to get to at some point.
We are definitely going to get to.
Because I love that sort of stuff. The
you're gonna
procession.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So we were saying that a lot of this information is in the tarot, and that's how I've come to it. It's not a silly divination system. It's a condensation of these mystery traditions, survived, fortunately, and easy to access. And so that Cairo was also called a Tauro. And we're going to quickly decode that now. And we're going to compare my crappy drawing on the left that I just threw up quickly because there's nearly 100 slides here. So it was a case of, so just throw it up quickly. So what we've got is, if you look to the image to the far left, we have a pole. Well, that's the pole of the Earth. Those that T bar for the T cross are the planets, the planetary plane, the ecliptic.
Yep.
So even though those are right angled to each other, they aren't actually. They're a bit skew with by 23.5 degrees, which creates time. And at the top of that pole is the plough. I've written there plough stroke scythe, and I've just written Draco next to a funny swoosh over the top because that's the dragon, the serpent that eats its own tail at the top. Now, if we look to the very right of the bottom row, we see a serpent nailed to a cross. So we can see that serpent is the ecliptic. We'll see why the planets are seen as serpents Well, an easy, quick definition is that curling motion that the serpent makes up that pole is the same as the planets make when you look at them, because they're always going into retrograde, which means they go backwards. Because
if you're observing from Earth.
If you're observing from Earth, everything seems to go backwards, because we'll go on the opposite side of the sun to them, and what seemed like they were going one way, suddenly they're going the other way because we've looked at it from the opposite direction.
Yeah.
A bit like someone holding a left hand out, and then you walk around behind them, and to you it's suddenly the right hand.
Sure.
If you know what I mean, that swap sides, like looking in a mirror. So we're going to refer that also to these Kundalini things that we were saying before. Kundalini, by the way, to people, for people that don't know, is the idea that through things like special techniques of yoga, you can summon an energy from near the pelvis that can go up the spine and activate your brain in a different way. And that nailing of the serpent would be the fixing of this state.
Right.
And also the getting off the wheel of fate, because those planets for the ancients, as they do for astrologers now, symbolize fate, as it were, because those are the variables that are happening in life, and each one of them, depending on where they are, symbolizes a different aspect of psyche or reality. So now if we look at the second image from the left, we can see a Mayan stroke Aztec, out of the life of me, can't remember now, I think it's Mayan, Tau cross. You can see just by looking at it, it's the same. It looks the same. On the top is a very psychedelic macaw, and that is the, it says there, it's the Big Dipper, but it's the plough. Same thing. And then we can see a double-headed serpent underneath that on the T-bar. And that is the ecliptic, the planets. These planets, like we said, that are in many ways they're serpents, in more interesting ways than I just discussed, the serpents. And then underneath that, we've got basically the axis of the Earth leading up to the Milky Way. So it's all just the same. They're all the same symbol. They're all a symbol of their cosmology.
Right.
Their cosmology being the Earth, and then 7 planets, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, all based on the orbital speed, as Phil said before. The Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Then, so those were the wandering stars, the planets, because they moved in relation to each other. But the stars in the background didn't move in relation to each other. Those were the fixed stars. Yeah. This was seen as like being almost infinity. Very nearly infinity. Where the aeons come from, which is this slower precessional movement. But we'll get into that. The precession is a backwards movement due to the axis of the Earth. Mm-hmm. So,